Marianne Williamson, the author of A Return to Love, says that we manufacture depression through loveless sex. So this conversation is an ode to salt and pepper. Let's talk about sex. And it is a conversation that can make people feel uncomfortable. And people don't realize that sex and the brain go together. And what we're specifically going to talk about is the impact of casual sex on the brain and on people's lives. And I feel like as a doctor, a lot of what I do is counsel people about the risk and benefits and possible long-term consequences of some of the actions that they take. And I wouldn't be doing my job as a neurologist, as a physician, as your personal brain expert, if I didn't tell you that, look, there are some good things about casual sex, maybe one or two, but there are potentially some consequences that you need to know about. And so that's where this conversation is sort of going to go. And first, let's define what it means to have casual sex. Casual sex is having sex with one or more partners that you're not committed to. It's about having sex with one or more partners that you are not in a romantic relationship with. And we know that this goes on in our society, and it's going to go on in our society forever. But you need to know that sometimes it is your brain controlling you and leading you down this direction. And in a society that is oversexed, that is using sex to sell everything, that promotes sexiness every chance it gets. Look, I see business people on social media who use sex to sell, right? They're in their bikinis, they're in their swim trunks, they're just trying to be as sexy as possible, and they may be selling a completely unrelated product, but they know it's going to grab your attention, right? That's the kind of society that we live in. So let's talk a little bit about the impact of casual sex on the brain. When people have sex, certainly it can feel good. Casual sex can feel great in the moment, especially if people are reaching climax, especially if maybe they're feeling a little risky, a little frisky, right? Maybe a little uncomfortable at the moment, but they're overcoming that and their brain loves the excitement of that. Can make somebody feel good. But long term, it can have some negative consequences. And here's why. When you have casual sex, your brain and body are releasing chemicals. It's the same chemicals it releases when you have romantic sex. Right? There's only a certain amount of chemicals that the brain and body can produce. So it's going to sound just like a lot of the chemicals that we've already talked about. But when you have sex, your brain releases dopamine, which plays a role in the motivation and reward centers of your brain. It's also the hormone that is most linked to addiction. And so when you're having casual sex and it feels all exciting, you get this release of dopamine, you get this rush of energy and you're feeling great, right? And you're motivated to do it again and again. Oftentimes, just like an addict, all you're doing is chasing that dopamine high. And every time you do it, you're going to need to hit a higher level of dopamine for you to feel as good as you did the last time. And sometimes, after that higher dopamine sort of plummets after the act, man, it can leave you feeling kind of low. You can leave that encounter feeling depressed and feeling anxious. And then you're like, well, I don't want to feel depressed and anxious anymore. I want to feel great like I did 10, 15 minutes ago. And then you start chasing it again. Marianne Williamson, the author of A Return to Love, says that we manufacture depression through loveless sex. Sex can often lead to depression, especially when it's casual. So I talked to you a little bit about dopamine and how dopamine can increase during casual sex for the excitement, and it motivates you to do it again. And then the plummet of dopamine can lead to some depression and anxiety as a result. But there are other chemicals that are involved in sex, including casual sex. And one of those chemicals, actually we'll talk about two of those chemicals, vasopressin and oxytocin. Both men and women respond to vasopressin and oxytocin, but they respond to them differently. Vasopressin, men are much more sensitive to. And what vasopressin does is that it sort of ignites the sexual craving, ignites the chase. Oxytocin is the bonding hormone. It is the hormone that gets released when a mother births a child. It is the hormone that gets released when a mother is breastfeeding to bond her to her child. Well, guess what? That hormone also gets released when we're having sex. It gets released both for men and women. We'll both feel bonded. Certainly women often feel more bonded than men because they're more sensitive to that hormone. But what happens when we're having casual sex now with multiple people time after time? We become a little desensitized to that hormone. It doesn't bond us in the way that it would before. And you might think, well, Dr. Douyon, that's great. It's casual sex. I don't want to be bonded to this person. But what happens when you meet the person that you do want to be bonded to? And now you can't form that bond. The science is out that sometimes when people are having casual sex, they have a difficulty bonding long-term with their partners, with their lovers, with their husbands, and their wives. Now, I can't tell you for sure how many casual sexual encounters that you need to have in order to desensitize yourself and have difficulty bonding with people. Some studies say it's 5. After 5 encounters of casual sex, then you struggle to bond. Some studies say it's 10. Everybody's different. But you need to know what it is that you want for your life. Do you want down the line to have difficulty bonding with somebody that you want to spend the rest of your life with? Do you want down the line to be in a long-term committed relationship or to be in a marriage and now be craving other people and be addicted to the dopamine levels or having difficulty bonding to your partner and then trying to seek that bond elsewhere? That is what your brain is doing, and that is how your brain is responding to the casual sex that we are seeing in society. Hey guys, thank you for listening to this episode. If you want to know the next steps that you can take, then you definitely want to check out my online course, Take Charge of Your Brain. When I think about this course and think about some of the testimonials, I think about the guy who was finally able to put out his very first music album. I think about the people that have been able to overcome health challenges as a result of being in this course, or people who are able to start their own businesses as a result of being in this course. I even think about somebody who was finally able to get pregnant, have the family of her dreams because of what she learned in this course. This course is going to be transformative for you. Here's a secret tip I have for you. Success in health, in business, and in life starts in your brain. So take charge of your brain today. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Now back to this episode. So I just finished telling you a little bit about oxytocin and how you can become desensitized to it, making it really difficult for you to pair bond or bond with your lover or husband or wife or long-term partner. But think about this as a lethal combination. You're desensitized to oxytocin, and then you're always chasing a dopamine high. And that dopamine high, that peak that you're going to need to reach every time you have a sexual encounter needs to be higher and higher and higher. You're never going to be satisfied in your current relationship if that is part of your story, if that's part of your brain's makeup at this point, because you taught your brain to function in this way. Chasing a high that's going to be impossible to constantly meet, right? That's what addicts are doing. That's what people who are addicted to cocaine are doing. It's causing dopamine levels to spike, and then they need more and more and more of it. One, because the dopamine rewards that behavior, but then they need to chase that high more and more as the peak gets higher. Well, it's the same thing with sex. You're going to be chasing that, which is going to be really tough to meet in a relationship or even in casual encounters at some point. And then you can't even bond. Is that really what you want for your life? You need to be honest with yourself about that. Look, I'm a doctor, and I'm an idealistic doctor. So if the question is, should we engage in casual sex? That idealistic doctor in me says no, it doesn't benefit us. It's not good for our brains. And then our brains are now controlling the actions that we're taking when it comes to our sexual encounters. We are no longer in charge of this, right? And that's why we have addicts, sex addicts, drug addicts, addicts in every aspect of life. But I'm also a realist. I'm a person. I know how this society works. And I know that people are going to continue to engage in casual sex. And so I just want you to be informed about the decisions that you're making and how it impacts your brain, and therefore how it impacts your life. So if you do decide to engage in casual sex, here are a couple of tips that I have for you. The first one is you need to have open and honest conversation, not just with your partner, but with yourself. You need to know what it is that you want for your life in this moment, but you also have to think beyond this moment. You've got to think about your future. If you know that you want to be a husband and you want to be bonded to your wife, well, then it's probably not a good idea to engage in a lot of casual sex or in any casual sex. If you are a woman who knows that you want to be married down the line and have that bond with your husband, then it's probably not a good idea to do so. But you have to be open and honest with yourself about what it is that you want today, what it is that you want tomorrow, and what it is that you want a few years from now. The other thing that you need to consider is STDs. Look, in the last few years, as we've been sort of in this pandemic, I've been telling people, well, not only do you have to worry about STDs at this point, you got to worry about getting COVID from somebody, right? But with regards to STDs, there were STDs that we thought would have been eradicated at this point, like syphilis, that have come back. Syphilis has long-term consequences. It actually has long-term consequences in your brain and nervous system. We call that neurosyphilis. It could lead to things like dementia. It could lead to disorders in your thinking and in your personality and in your memory. Syphilis can cause nerve damage throughout your body. When I was in med school, I don't know, 15, 16, almost 20 years ago, man, we read about syphilis in the textbooks, but never expected to see it in real life. And now we see it in life. And syphilis is not the only STD out there. There are plenty of others, right? Herpes is a common one. I got called a couple of years ago because a patient who had genital herpes also had all these lesions all over her eyes. Turned out that she had ocular herpes. The herpes was affecting her vision. So we've got to be really mindful of the decisions that we make because they have consequences. The other thing that you really want to consider is that when we share our bodies in this sort of sexual way, we also transfer energies to people and we absorb their energy. That can have some devastating emotional and mental consequences. So you certainly want to be mindful about who you choose to share that special part of you with, who you choose to go to bed with. And so what I would recommend is that if you have had a lot of casual sex and you're concerned about your ability to bond later on, that one of the things that you do is maybe undergo some therapy. You want to get to the source of maybe why you were doing this, so that way you don't repeat anything that you may regret later on. You want to give yourself all the tools that are going to be possible for you to create the relationships and the life that you want for yourself. If you're somebody who's had a lot of casual sex, there's no judgment. You can always change your life. Life for me is about evolution. You can always create the health, the relationships, and the life that you want for yourself. Guys, thank you for listening to this episode. I know that for some people, it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable, but I just wanted to let you know how your brain reacts to sex, especially casual sex, so that way you have the tools to create the relationships and life that you want for yourself. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Surviving Your Brain podcast.